So literacy, we're at the point where we'll be looking at formal reading, writing. And literacy is an essential part of our everyday life. So if you think about how much you use your literacy skills on a daily basis, it makes you realise actually how important it is. And it also includes talking and listening as well as your reading and writing. It's all forms of communication. And one of the first stages that children will go through in being able to learn to read is environmental print. So I'm sure you've all got children, very young children, who will be able to identify the McDonald's sign. I know of 2-year-olds who know exactly what that means. And that's actually a pre-reading skill. It's fancy names, the logographic stage, but that's where children are looking at pictures and words and signs, and they're being able to make sense of it. So if you shop a lot at Tesco or Asda's, chances are your child will be able to read that, and that's them using their environmental print and their logographic skills to be able to read it. So that is something that you have to go through to be able to be an effective reader. So ways that you can support things like this. Well, encouraging children to listen carefully to all the sounds around them. Listening is a key skill to do with your reading and writing. So if you cannot listen and hear sounds, it will make it very difficult for you to go on and go through the reading process. So it could be when you're out in the park, what did you hear? What can you tell mum and dad, what did you hear? Or what did you hear in the house? And really encouraging them to tune in for these little things. You might want to explore different signs that you see in the street or when you're out for a walk or in a supermarket. Again, that's helping that environmental print and having lots of chat around it. Or even something as simple as playing I Spy and using your sounds. That's always really helpful. But there's print everywhere, whether it's on number plates or on signs or in the house, on labels, all these kind of things. Now, one of the approaches that we use to teach literacy in Llanfinnans, but also in the wider authority, this approach is unique to Fife. It's called the Workshop for Literacy approach. I'll not bore you to tears with it about it all, but what we do is we use real books as a model for teaching children how to read. So although reading books, your child's reading book, will be very important and it does have a place, what's even more effective is real books, like your Julia Donaldson, all these kinds of things. And we use those as a basis to get children really hooked into their literacy. And the thought is that there are 3 parts of your brain, and if you develop all 3 parts of your brain at the same time, you stand the best chance of becoming literate. So we'll work with children on these 3 areas, and I've used it myself for many years, and it's a really effective approach. So we'll look at the semantic pathway, so that's your understanding of what something is. So if I said to you cat, you know that a cat has 4 legs and a tail. The orthographic pathway, that's what text looks like and creating it. So if you go back to that environmental print and looking at the shapes of the letters and creating your own letters, so that will then feed into their writing skills. And the phonological pathway, that's your ability to hear sounds. Like I said, if children can't hear the sounds, so for example, if I said to them, where does this sound come in stop, the beginning, the middle, or the end, that's giving me a real clue whether they're able to hear the sound or not. And if they're not able to hear the sound, that lets me know as a teacher that I've got to do a lot more work on that listening for the sounds before they're ready to move on to their reading and their writing. Now, ways that you can support that. And again, these are the suggestions that I give are by no means mandatory. These are if you've got 6 weeks off and you want to do stuff on a rainy day, something that you think might be helpful, these are all suggestions. Please don't think I'm sending you away with a list of must-do, because that certainly isn't the case. Adults can be the listener as well as the person who gives instructions. So I'm sure you've all got children who can talk the hind legs of a donkey, but sometimes it's just letting them ramble on and see what they come up with. Or thinking about the questions that you ask. So it might not be a question that requires a yes or no answer, but a more explanation type answer. You might want to talk about a book before you read it. So before story time, maybe at bedtime or on a rainy day, you might talk about what's on the front cover or what's on the blurb at the back. All of these things will really get the children really interested and excited to read it. And you can link it to everyday life as well. So if there's a book and it's about shopping or whatever, then link it to the last time that you were at the supermarket, so it's making sense to the child. You might want to have chats about what happened when, or you might want to think about clapping words, beats and words, syllables, or if it's a sentence like I love my mum, clapping it out so they can count the number of words. That allows them to hear the word boundaries, and again, that's a key skill for being able to write. If they can't hear the separate words, they're not going to know where to space them out. So again, these are things that you can be doing. Again, just suggestions. that would support what we're doing in school. So reading together is so important. There's a piece of research that talks about the Matthew effect, and what it's found is that if you're a person who has been read to and reads a lot, the chances are that you will be more literate than a person who hasn't. The more words that you're exposed to, the more vocabulary that you hear, the more literate you will become, which means that we really will be bombarding the children with stories and texts and everything left, right and centre, because we want them to be as literate as possible. So again, reading things again and again, I'm sure your children all have favourite stories that they never get tired of hearing. And it's really good, they love that, because then they can start to join in, and sometimes they like to join in with the wee middle bits and say it along with you. But know when to stop. If they're tired, if they're fed up, if they don't want a story, then leave it. That's okay. It's what we want it to be, a pleasurable and enjoyable activity, not something that we want to be forced. If we're looking at books with children, maybe think about how we're handling it. And a lot of this work will have been in nursery, where they talk about the author and the illustrator, the front cover, the spine, all these kinds of things. And what's really helpful is when you're reading, to point out the left to right tracking with the words. That way the children are getting the understanding of what way they should be reading, but also when it comes to the writing, which direction they should be writing in. You might want to talk about the order of the story. So what came first, what happened, what came next? And again, none of these are sit down and do a piece of work. They're all just chit-chatty kinds of things that you could be doing when you're going about other parts of your daily life. Now, these are just a sample of some of the books that we might use. There are millions of them out there. And what we will try to do is always pick books that really engage the children. So if we know that they are particularly into Aliens Love Underpants or something like that, that is what we'll go with, to really get them engaged, want to listen, want to read stories. I know there's a fantastic library in Cowdenbeath that are really good at lending out loads of books. And I also know that Asda's have got a great offer on just now, where you're getting about 2 for £7, which is something that I'm sure they will come home and say, oh, I was reading that book, I love it. And just something to keep encouraging. Now, phonics, as I was talking about the phonological pathway earlier, phonics is key to being able to read. If you can't master your phonics, you won't be able to read. So nursery rhymes feed into that. When children are able to recite nursery rhymes, when they're able to listen to them, that means that they're listening for the different sounds and how they rhyme and moving the sounds about, and that is key to being ready to read. Phonic sounds. So if we're playing a game such as I Spy, we would talk about the letter sound rather than the letter name. So we wouldn't be talking about A, B and C, we'd be talking about A and B. And the reason that we talk about the sound is when a child is trying to break down a word, to blend it or to sound it out, you would sound it out with the letters. There are some words or some letters that you have to be really careful of, like L and M, where it's not L, it's O, or M, not meh, because you can be putting an extra sound in there, and when they start to try and blend them together, that can cause them all kinds of bother. So recognise and print. I'm sure your children will already recognise the letters in their name. That's a great place to start with. So if their name begins with a C, oh, is there anything you can see in the supermarket that begins with that letter? That's just that tiny wee way of starting to hook them in, and they think they're playing a game that's got lots of value for them. You might want to get them to match letters at home in the environment. So that letter that was on the DVD case, can you see that elsewhere in the house? Is it in a newspaper? Is it on the television screen? And model reading things. If your children see you reading, then they're going to want to do it too, because they want to be the same as mum and dad. Tidy up games, a great way of getting the living room all tidied up. So can you pick up something beginning with B? Can you pick up something beginning with K? Again, getting them listening for those sounds. And my cousin's wee boy is currently, he's going into primary 1, and he went through a phase where he was saying to me, Aunt Christy, I want something beginning with B, or something beginning with F. What on earth is he on about? He was wanting a biscuit, and he was wanting a bit of fudge, but he thought he would be trying clever, and he was going through that stage of just playing with sounds and being able to try them out. Writing. So your child will already be going through a phase of writing. They might not be writing formula yet, but there's lots of stages that you go through in learning to write. And it's often called mark making or emergent writing. So it might be something to begin with as simple as that, or that over there. And it might look like a load of gobbledygook, but if you ask a child what they've written, chances are they'll be able to tell you what's there. There'll be a whole story that goes along with that piece of writing, and they'll know what it says. By this stage, they're maybe at the point where each of those individual letters, the ones on the pink card, that's the stage where that letter stands for a whole word. And again, if you were to ask that child, they'll tell you what they wrote. And then you can move on to where we're looking at it phonetically and we're able to make sense of what it said. What I would say is we should be encouraging any kind of writing. And it's really interesting to ask the children what they have been writing and get them to tell you all their fantastic stories. And you might ask them one day, and it might be one story, and you might ask them about the same bit of paper the next day, and it might tell them something totally different. But definitely go with it. And it's really tempting to say, oh, Mummy will just show you actually how you spell it. What I would say is, urge caution with that, because sometimes children can be really reluctant to pick up a pencil and give it a go because they want it to be perfectly right. Just celebrate anything that they're doing with the writing and really praise them up for it, because we'll have to go through this stage in primary one where it's not entirely correct. It takes a long time to get there, and what we don't want to do is knock their confidence in any way. Now, the tripod graph, so looking at how they hold a pencil, this is something that we will be working on really quickly by the time that they come into primary one. And it's we call it the pincer grip or the tripod grasp. But how we do it with the children is we say to them to take their hand, we talk about quack it up, so they do this, and then we talk about laying the pencil in there, so lying it in his bed and resting it on their finger. Now some children will have got into the habit of this. You maybe see it yourself, you know, they're colouring, they're writing, they're doing all this. And if there is anything that you could help us with, and again, by no means mandatory, but it's easier for the child, is over the holidays, if you see them doing this, that is something you might want to correct, because it's not instantly comfortable once you've done this to get to that. So they need lots of practice with it. And that's something that we'll be really strict on when they come into school. We won't allow that. We'll continue to correct their pencil grip. But that's something that you might want to show them as well, or help them with when you see them working with pencils or something at home. So how can you support writing? Well, just encourage them to write in everyday situations. If you're going to the shop and you're writing yourself a list, give them a bit of paper and say, what does Mummy need? And see if they can write a list, and they'll tell you, like I say, it might not mean anything to you, but they'll know what's on their list. Paper and pens, if there's anything for them in the house to be able to write, scribble, draw, and that's always really helpful. But you might want to encourage them to help you write an email or a text. Can you find the buttons on the computer? Can you find the letters on the phone? And again, they're thinking about the sound. It all seems lots of fun to them. They don't realise actually it's a learning opportunity. If you're feeling a wee bit more adventurous, then you can work with gloop, which is cornflour and water. I don't particularly like it, it gives me the heebies. But you can use sugar, sand, flour, and you can just pour a wee bit on the dish. And then they can practice writing their sounds with their finger. And if they don't get it right, then you can just smooth it over and they can try again. So something on a rainy day like today, you can have, you know, quite a wee bit of fun just pouring these things in dishes, and they can try them out. And they feel really grown up, they like that. So, again, like I say, this is by no means mandatory. These are things that would be helpful, but please don't leave here today feeling like, oh, I've got this, that, and the next thing to do. These are things that if you have the time and you feel that you would be up for it, that would be helpful. So for children to know and recite nursery rhymes, so thinking about listening for those sounds and looking at the rhyming words that are within them. Can they write their name? So we will happily write their name on their work for them, but that's something that they might want to do to be a wee bit more independently. What we would say is, if you're working with them at home and you're helping them to write their name, keep the capital letter to the beginning and only the beginning, because bad habits take a long time to unlearn. And if we've got capital letters in the middle of names, that's something that we actually have to go back and reteach. An appropriate pencil grip. If there was anything that you were going to work on or anything that you wanted to keep your eye out for, I would definitely say it was that. So no more of this and more of this. And it will just make that transition into more formal learning a little bit easier.